Welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we are going underground, well, not literally, but figuratively, I guess, as we excavate the fascinating site of Bet Guvrin.
Yeah, Bet Guvrin is incredible because you've got layer upon layer of history there, right from like the Roman period all the way back even further and then all the way through to the Crusader era.
So many different civilizations all using and adapting and reshaping the same location.
We've got a lot of sources on this one.
We do.
So hopefully we can give you, the listener, a really kind of holistic picture of what life was like there and some of the really interesting things that archaeologists have found.
Yeah. I was really fascinated reading through these sources by how archaeologists actually dig, because it's not just like Indiana Jones with a shovel, is it? There's a real science to it.
No, not at all. And in fact, it's really changed over time as our understanding of the past has changed. So for instance, they highlight that like in prehistoric digs, they often work in much smaller units, sometimes like half a meter by half a meter.
Wow, that's tiny.
Yeah, you wouldn't even stand in the square. And that's because the further back you go, the more fragile and dispersed the evidence becomes.
Ah, I see. So you need that level of detail to pick up on those really subtle clues from the past.
Exactly. But then as you move into later periods, like say the early Bronze Age, then the biblical period, the classical period, things get a little bit bigger. They start working in 5 meter by 5 meter squares, because they're looking for maybe building foundations or the layout of objects within a settlement.
Makes sense. You've got more to work with as you move closer to the present. So once they've got their square marked out, what's next? What do they actually do?
The first thing is to remove the topsoil, so all the recent layers that have accumulated over time. This gets you down to what they call the sealed archaeological layer,
Okay.
meaning a level that hasn't been disturbed since antiquity.
Right.
And from there, they start the really meticulous process of sifting through the soil.
So making sure they don't miss anything.
Precisely. They don't want to miss even the tiniest artifacts.
What happens to all the stuff they dig up? I mean, we're talking thousands of years of history. There must be tons of it.
Oh, there's a huge amount. Each object gets categorized by a material, and then, especially in the case of pottery, it can be used for dating.
Mm-hmm.
Archaeologists can tell the age of a piece of pottery just by looking at its style and decoration.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they have this term they use, vatable, meaning that there are specific diagnostic pieces of pottery like rims, handles, bases, things like that,
Okay.
that have styles that change over time.
Ah, so like fingerprints for different periods.
Exactly. And then, of
Uh-huh.
course, there's the painstaking task of trying to piece broken vessels back together. If that's not possible, they keep those diagnostic pieces, document the rest. And because of storage limitations, sometimes they actually don't keep everything on site.
Yeah, storage must be a nightmare. I mean, one of our sources mentioned that there are over 36,000 registered archaeological sites in Israel. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's an insane number.
How do you even begin to manage that much history?
It's tricky. And sometimes it leads to really interesting situations. Our sources tell this amazing story of a stone, an inscribed stone, that was discovered in a storage unit in Bet Shemesh.
Oh, wow.
It had been cataloged, but its full significance went unnoticed for
It's
decades.
just sitting there in storage. What was so special about this stone?
Well, that's where the story takes another twist.
Okay.
Around the same time, a cave was discovered near the temple at Bet Guvrin.
Okay.
It's now believed to have been a thesaurus.
The what?
Thesaurus, Thesauros, which was basically a repository for cultic objects that were no longer being actively used.
Oh, so like an ancient storage unit for religious items.
That's a great way to think about it.
Not just some random hiding spot.
Exactly. And this cave had also been the target of nighttime diggers, probably looters.
Oh, no.
And they probably took any of the really valuable stuff.
Yeah.
But their activity led to the discovery of these massive inscribed stones.
And these stones were...
Initially, there were 3 pieces that they found, and they started the work of translation. They had a scholar from Bar Ilan University start comparing them to other inscriptions, looking for similarities.
Makes sense.
And this is where it gets really cool. They realized that the Israel Museum actually possessed another stone from the Bet Shemesh storage unit that had been overlooked.
The one we were just talking about.
The very same.
Whoa!
And when they compared the newly discovered fragments to this one, they realized that they were all part of the same inscription, potentially one of 2 identical copies of a decree.
That's an amazing coincidence. So this decree, what did it actually say?
It turned out to be a decree from an authority figure named Lucis,
Okay.
who governed the region between Syria and Phoenicia, which included Israel.
Right.
But what's particularly interesting is that Lucis was a pagan official appointed to oversee the temples by Heliodorus.
Heliodorus, wasn't he?
Yeah, the guy from the Book of Maccabees.
Exactly.
The one who tried to steal from the temple treasury.
But he was actually just a tax collector.
Well, the Book of Maccabees portrays him as trying to steal from the temple treasury.
Oh, okay.
But it's more likely that he was simply trying to collect taxes.
Ah, I see.
And for the local people at the time, the temple treasures were considered communal property, intended for supporting widows and orphans and the priests.
Makes sense.
So allowing a pagan official to basically take a cut of these funds was seen as a huge threat.
Right, it's a direct challenge to their way of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why this forgotten stone is so important.
Wow.
It gives us a direct link to the events that led up to the Maccabean revolt against the Greek Empire.
So this stone is basically a piece of Hanukkah history.
You could say that.
What happened to it?
Well, sadly, one of our sources indicated that the part of the inscription that was looted from the caves ended up being sold on the black market in New York City.
Oh, no.
Eventually, it was acquired by a collector who, according to one account, later decided to donate it to the Israel Museum.
Well, at least it ended up somewhere safe.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about what's hidden beneath the surface, but Bet Guvrin also has some incredible remains above ground. You've got the Roman and the Crusader layers right there for all to see.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that we're only seeing a fraction of what was once there.
Really?
Yeah. For instance, only a small portion of the ancient Roman city is visible.
What was the Roman city called?
Eleutheropolis.
Eleutheropolis. What does that mean?
City of the freedmen.
City of the freedmen. Interesting.
There are a couple of reasons why we don't see more of it. One is for preservation. Once sites have been excavated and documented, archaeologists often rebury them to protect them from the elements.
Makes sense.
And then also, they intentionally leave some areas unexcavated, for future generations who will have better technology and techniques.
It's like saving some for later.
Exactly.
Okay. So what is the most prominent Roman feature that we can still see today?
That would be the amphitheater.
The amphitheater.
You can still walk through the remains and get a sense of its scale and grandeur. It probably had a velarium, that kind of awning system made of fabric to provide some shade for the spectators.
Yeah, it gets hot in Israel.
It does. And what's interesting is that it wasn't initially designed as a pure amphitheater.
Oh.
It actually started as a combined hippodrome and stadium, so like a versatile space for horse racing and athletic competitions.
Makes sense.
And then later, it was modified into a true amphitheater.
How did they do that?
They built a wall down the middle, basically joining two adjacent theaters to create the oval arena.
Ah, so like two theaters became one.
Exactly.
And the types of entertainment also evolved, didn't they?
They did. The Romans started out with a lot of the Greek-inspired athletic competitions, but they really developed a taste for more, let's say, visceral forms of entertainment.
Like what?
Like gladiatorial combat and animal fights.
Oh, yeah, classic Roman entertainment.
And there are a couple of possible explanations for this shift that our sources mention.
What are they?
Well, one is that the Romans just had a huge urban populace that they needed to entertain, keep them happy and distracted.
That makes sense. Bread and circuses.
Right, exactly. But also, and perhaps more significantly, especially in a region like this that had experienced revolts, these spectacles may have served to normalize violence for the soldiers stationed there.
Ah, so it was about desensitizing them to bloodshed.
In a way, yeah.
And this amphitheater at Bet Guvrin, was it just some local arena?
Not at all.
Was something more important?
Much more. It was one of only 3 planned Roman amphitheaters in what's now Israel.
Wow.
And it was built as part of a purpose-built Roman city, specifically for the soldiers who were stationed there after the first Jewish revolt.
So not just an adaptation of an existing structure, but something totally new.
Exactly. You can still see evidence of the cages beneath the arena floor where they kept the animals.
Whoa.
And also, the foundation is actually wider than the visible structure, which indicates that there was probably a collapsed upper tier.
So it was even bigger than it looks today.
Yeah, much bigger.
Wow. And you mentioned that the city was called Eleutheropolis, the city of the freedmen. Was that a literal name?
Well, here's where it gets really fascinating.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The freedmen who populated this city were actually captured Jewish soldiers after the Bar Kokhba revolt.
You're kidding.
Nope. These are the very people who had fought against Roman rule, and now they were being forced to live in this Roman city.
And maybe even fight in the arena.
Potentially, yeah.
That's so ironic. The city of the freedmen populated by prisoners.
A cruel irony.
And they found a temple room under the amphitheater as well, right?
They did, a small, almost hidden room.
What was its purpose?
It seems to have been a place where fighters could pray before entering the arena.
So like a last-minute appeal to the gods?
Or to God, actually. What's really interesting is that they found both pagan idols and oil lamps without any idolatrous imagery in this room, which suggests that both pagan and Jewish individuals were using this space for their own forms of worship.
A testament to the diversity of the people who were forced to fight.
And the oil lamps are particularly interesting because they're a really strong indicator of Jewish practice.
Fascinating. So you've got this mix of cultures, religions, all within this one space.
Exactly.
Were the games free?
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
People had to pay to get in.
Just like today.
Pretty much, yeah. And the gladiators themselves were actually trained by private contractors.
So there was a whole industry built around this entertainment.
Exactly.
But the amphitheater's days as an entertainment venue were numbered, right?
They were. By the Byzantine period, from the 4th century CE onwards, things started to change.
What happened?
Well, with the rise of Christianity, there was less and less tolerance for large-scale bloodshed as a form of entertainment.
Makes sense.
So the amphitheater gradually fell into disuse.
And what happened to it?
It was repurposed.
Into what?
A market.
Really?
Yeah. The circular structure and the multiple entrances actually made it ideal for setting up shops and stalls.
Talk about a transformation. From gladiators to groceries.
It is pretty wild.
So the amphitheater becomes a market, and then what? What comes next in the history of Bet Guvrin?
Well, then we get to the Crusader period.
Okay.
And they built their own city, a Crusader city, right on top of the Roman remains.
Did they destroy the Roman structures?
Not necessarily.
Mm.
Often, they incorporated the Roman structures into their own buildings.
Oh, so they reused what was already there.
Yeah, like for instance, they would use Roman pillars as structural elements in their new constructions.
Clever.
And the group that really took control of the site during this period was the Teutonic Order.
The Teutonic Order. Who were they?
They were a German Catholic military order.
Right.
And they built a pretty substantial fortress there.
Okay.
You can still see the remains of the moat that surrounded it.
Ah, for defense.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that they weren't just warriors. They were also really involved in agriculture.
Farmer Knights, huh?
Yeah, they had a lot of land in the area. And they were producing all sorts of goods, like oil and wine.
Makes sense. You've got to feed your army.
Exactly. But their control of Bet Guvrin didn't last forever.
What happened?
Eventually, they were conquered by Saladin's forces.
Oh, right, Saladin.
Yeah, and then after that, the Mongols swept through the region.
The Mongols. They were pretty destructive, weren't they?
Generally, yeah.
So they probably destroyed the Crusader fortress, right?
Well, not exactly. In a really unique twist, one of the churches within the Crusader complex was actually transformed into a mosque by the Mongols.
Really?
Yeah. Normally, they would just destroy captured fortifications, so this is really unusual.
Wow.
But it shows how strategically important this location was, sitting on key trade routes and military routes.
So each new power comes in, leaves their mark, and adapts the site to their needs.
Exactly.
What are some of the distinctive features of Crusader architecture that we can still see today?
Well, if you look closely at the stonework, you'll see they used a lot of marble.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah. And you can often find chiselers' marks on the stones.
What are chiselers' marks?
Basically, they're like signatures left by the individual craftsmen who shaped the stones.
Cool.
And another common practice was to reuse older stones in their construction.
Oh, so like recycling ancient building materials.
Exactly. If you look carefully, you might see a stone that's clearly Roman incorporated into a Crusader wall.
Wow, the history is embedded in the walls themselves.
It really is.
And the Crusader complex wasn't just a random jumble of buildings, was it?
No, it had distinct functional areas, just like the Roman city before it.
Like what?
Well, we can identify the refectory, for instance.
The what?
The refectory, refectory,
Okay.
which was the communal dining hall where the knights would gather for their meals.
Interesting.
And there's also evidence of bathhouses, although those were initially constructed by the Romans.
Oh, yeah, the Roman bathhouses. Those were pretty impressive, weren't they?
They were. They had this system called a hypocaust.
Hypocaust.
Yeah, Hypocaust,
Okay.
which was basically an elevated floor supported by pillars.
Okay.
And then they would heat the rooms by circulating hot air from an underground furnace beneath the floor.
That's so clever.
It is, isn't it?
Roman ingenuity.
And there were hot and cold bathing areas and facilities for generating steam.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's a big contrast to the Crusader period when, according to our sources, they weren't even using the Roman sewage system.
Really?
Yeah, apparently sanitation wasn't a top priority.
Oh, yuck. That's not a good combination. Hot baths and no sewage system.
Not ideal.
And the Crusader complex, it's got all these narrow corridors and passages. It seems like defense was a big concern.
It definitely was. The whole layout was designed with defense in mind, creating choke points, making it difficult for attackers to move freely.
And one final thing I wanted to ask about is sometimes you see these really low doorways and passages in ancient structures. Were people just shorter back then?
It's a common misconception, but the answer is no, not really.
So no need to imagine everyone as hobbits.
Exactly. There have been some minor fluctuations in average height over time due to, nutrition and other factors, but it's not like people were dramatically shorter.
Okay, good to know. So after exploring all of this, what's the most significant thing that you take away from the story of Bet Guvrin?
For me, it's the resilience of the location. You've got centuries of history, different cultures coming and going, all leaving their mark. But they didn't just abandon what came before. They adapted it, reused it, sometimes in really surprising ways.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. The inscription that was languishing in a storage unit that turned out to be a key piece of Hanukkah history.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And then the irony of the city of the freedmen being populated by captured Jewish soldiers.
Yeah.
And the amphitheater, from gladiatorial arena to bustling marketplace.
Such a transformation.
And then a Crusader church repurposed as a mosque by the Mongols.
Yes, so many twists and turns in the story of this one place.
It makes you wonder what stories are still waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. As one of our sources put it, the purpose of all this isn't just to learn facts and dates, but it's to gain a deeper understanding of the human story.
Right.
Our capacity for innovation and adaptation, and sometimes our capacity for, profound irony as well.
Yeah. And these stories from the past, they can give us some really valuable perspective, I think.
I agree.
So for you, the listener, we leave you with this thought. How can we look at the spaces around us, maybe even in our own communities, and see those echoes of the past?
Yeah, think about it. Even the most mundane objects, a piece of pottery, a chisel mark on a stone, they can all hold incredible stories.
Go out there and explore. You never know what you might find.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.